We have top-notch panelists today. We have Henri Pihkala, that is the co-founder of Streamr. We have Peng, it's the CEO of Tendermint Cosmos. We have Aidan Hyman, that is co-founder and CEO of ChainSafe Systems. Des Martin, VP of Marketing and User Growth at Brave Software. And Eric Wang, Ecosystem Development Lead at Party. And I hope I pronounce your names right, but I'm horrible with names. And actually, I wanted to throw a first questions to all of you. I want to know, how are your respective companies involved in the development of the next generation of the internet? So let's do a round so that everyone knows what you're doing and what you're working on. So Henri, the first one, because you're in the middle of the screen.
Am I in the middle? Woo!
Yep, sorry.
All right. So yeah, we developed a protocol and ecosystem called Streamr. And to understand where it fits in the new internet, it's necessary to, of course, understand what the protocol is. So it's a decentralized protocol for transporting and sharing real-time data. So if you think of it, many Web 2 applications have features that leverage real-time data, such as sending an instant message or showing a stream of market data from a financial exchange, or collaborative document writing and whatnot. So you often see this kind of thing in the front end, and in the back end, real-time data is used to store what happened or collect metrics about application usage, or to integrate data flows between applications and stuff like that. And the traditional way to implement these features is to use a centralized message broker, such as a cloud service, right? But in a decentralized protocol like Streamr, this middleman that all your data goes through, that doesn't exist, right? So not only it fixes the sort of security issue of all your data going through some one thing, such a centralized broker would also be like a scalability bottleneck. So this approach enables decentralized applications to use real-time data, not only for the traditional type of features and the front end and so on, but the open and permissionless infrastructure also opens up the door for much bigger interconnected systems like IoT and smart cities infrastructure to share data efficiently and at scale. So yeah, Streamr is not a blockchain. It's a peer-to-peer network, though, and designed for distributing messages that happen now. So if you compare to, say, IPFS, a protocol for distributing static files, Streamr is not for static files, but for streams of data points that happen now and are sort of pushed from publishers to subscribers. And that happens by nodes in the peer-to-peer network, which anyone can run. And this process is incentivized by the Streamr data token. And that's pretty much it.
There you go. First piece of the Web3 that is not a blockchain. So let's move to Eric.
Yeah, hi everyone. So Parity really develops kind of two main products at the moment. So and they both work together quite closely. So the first product is Substrate, and the second product is this network called Polkadot. So I guess when we think about the new generation or the next generation of the internet, we think about an internet where I guess people are able to kind of communicate with one another or kind of do certain tasks without this control of this intermediary. So you in a sense, you kind of need this way to come into agreement of what this rule of communication is between all these different nodes. So essentially, this is kind of where the blockchain part or some other way to come into consensus comes in. And so currently, in the current development of this new generation of the internet, you have quite a few disparate protocols that are separately having their own sort of consensus algorithms and their own rules, essentially. But right now, it's these protocols right now are essentially communicating with each other in a very ineffective way, or they're simply sometimes not able to kind of communicate with each other. And in a new internet, you would want kind of everything to be as interconnected as possible. So really what Polkadot enables is, because the new internet requires all these different sets of consensus and different types of rules to be out there, Polkadot serves as a meta protocol essentially to kind of bridge them all together into kind of one security layer and one kind of layer where I guess they can all interoperate and all kind of, I guess, agree on an even more common set of rules of communication as well. And one of the problems that we've run into while developing Polkadot is that in order for Polkadot to work, you kind of have to have separate blockchains out there already. And since it's a little bit difficult to develop these separate blockchains, we've also developed Substrate, which essentially is a SDK, which allows people to develop a blockchain that is tailored towards their particular needs, that could or could not be connected to the Polkadot network.
Thank you. So we have the way of sharing information in a decentralized way, real time. We have a way of talking between different blockchains. And now, Aidan, what about ChainSafe?
Hi, thanks for having me here today, everyone, and Alfonso for moderating this panel. Hey, everyone, my name is Aidan. I'm a co-founder and CEO of ChainSafe Systems. And at ChainSafe, we're a 50-person blockchain research and development firm. And what that really means in terms of our day-to-day is building out core infrastructure, open source infrastructure for the decentralized distributed web. And so a lot of what we do is building out actual core implementations of protocols. So we contributed with a few different people on this call. We, for example, build out a Golang implementation of the Polkadot host, which is basically what Substrate is, a framework around. We build out a Rust implementation of FilePoint. We have a TypeScript implementation of ETH2 and all of the utilities that kind of go into that, as well as we maintain Web3.js, which is a JavaScript library used for interfacing with smart contracts in the Ethereum world. We also have been contributing to Ethermint, which is Ethereum on Tendermint using the Cosmos SDK. And we've recently started collaborating a lot with the Mina protocol, which is an incredibly exciting new privacy-focused blockchain in the space that I recommend people to check out. Outside of that, we also connect a lot of those chains through a project called ChainBridge and a few others as well. And we do a lot of security auditing and general research for different protocols looking to optimize and maybe answer some questions about certain aspects of what it is they do. So again, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited for this chat and to just talk to a lot of people throughout our conversation today. Thanks.
Thank you. And Peng, if you can explain a bit what is Cosmos and Tendermint, because Aidan mentioned it, so I guess you should be the next one.
Sure, thanks, Alfonso. So what do we do at Tendermint and Cosmos, right? So first of all, looking at the bigger picture, right? Demand for blockchain applications is on the rise everywhere, but yet there's major problems facing users and developers that are stunting even faster growth, right? We think that transaction fees for blockchain applications should be determined by the traffic of the users of that application. But instead, right now, transaction fees are determined by the total traffic of all apps on that blockchain. So, Ethereum, where all smart contracts happen on one chain, forces people to pay transaction fees based on how much other people use other apps. We don't think this makes a lot of sense. So, developers right now build on expensive blockchains because it means, direct access to a huge number of users who, have tokens on that chain and more funds that are also easily available on that chain. But it also means sacrificing that project sovereignty in the process. They're building on someone else's platform. So at Tendermint, we believe that blockchain interoperability means building application-specific blockchains, right? So application-specific chains should allow transaction fees to scale just by the app's traffic and by no other app. This should grant chain developers, the same direct access to users and funds of other blockchains while preserving the project sovereignty through this protocol that we have called IBC. So in Cosmos, we think that blockchain adoption should not be constrained by a single settlement layer, but instead is unleashed by an interoperable network of application-specific sovereign chains. And we think that the future, is a network of chains that all connect together. This is what Web3 is supposed to be. And like Aidan has been talking about and Eric has been talking about as well, these
But I
chains
guess,
will all be connected together.
and I guess that we need a way of interacting with all of this data that we're moving. And last but not least, we're gonna talk about how to interact with this new internet, right?
Yes, and hello everybody, and a big thank you to Victoria, Danielle, and Alfonso. So yeah, obviously I'm with Brave, and the title of this talk could be a strapline for Brave. I have it written down here: building a new internet, a bold plan to decentralize the web. That kind of sums up a lot of what we're doing at Brave. Maybe I'll just take a step back, because I think, Web3, in my opinion, my humble opinion, we're still defining what Web3 is, and it's often after the fact that we can kind of define these things. But if we look back at Web2 and where that went, I think it'll give us a better idea of Web3, the internet of value, looking at where we've come from to where we go. And, one of the things that's happened over the last 15 years is that a lot of the web is funded by an ad tech ecosystem that relies on surveillance. It relies on tracking, profiling, understanding people, and then it has this incredible optimization process to serve ads through many different pipes down into websites in milliseconds. But that's a kind of a broken system. From a user point of view, the whole privacy debate is becoming real for people. It's become a mainstream topic. And it doesn't even work for the advertisers, because lots of fraud is occurring, and publishers are getting ripped off as well. So there's a broken system in Web 2, and looking forward, there's so many people that contribute to the web, and somebody recently referred to the web as one of humanity's great achievements, and I actually think it is. I think initially I thought it was a bit of a grand statement, but I think it is. And we've got to look after that, right? That's an important living thing. And in order for it to survive, it needs a proper, business model. It needs something that can ensure its future success. And a core part of that in the Brave world is giving people privacy by default. And that creates a more respectful web, where you don't have large amounts of data getting siphoned off by a handful of large big tech players, and they get bigger and bigger, and the disparity between big tech and small creators, it's just getting further and further. And that's not a healthy system. That's not a healthy web. You cannot centralize everything in a couple of players and think we're going to be in a better place in the years ahead. So really, a very kind of top line, Brave is, you're talking about the next generation of the web. Brave is a next generation web browser. It puts privacy at its core, and when you cut out all the scripts and all the trackers and the stuff that gets downloaded in the background, you get a faster, cleaner experience, up to 6 times faster than Chrome. And because we are looking to put in this new business model into the web, we've introduced the basic attention token, and we have a wallet in the browser. That's where Brave is now. But I can give you a little bit of a sneak peek as to where Brave is going to be in 6 months, and I think you might find this interesting. So we've acquired a search engine, Tailcat, that will become Brave Search. So you will have Brave Browser plus Brave Search plus a revamped wallet and exchange built into the browser. So this opens up a whole range of things, in terms of people being able to travel across the web, earn as they go, spend as they go, no credit cards, frictionless. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity. And we think it'll create a much better balance that content creators can earn much easier. And you can kind of decentralize a lot of the weight and the influence of big tech. So I'll pause there, but that's kind of a little bit about our future vision. So if you think browser, search, and it's kind of like combine Google and Coinbase. I joke, we certainly don't want to become Google or Coinbase, but if you imagine merging those and then going forward. And I should mention that our user base at the moment, so we are at 10 million daily active users and 29 million monthly active users. So I believe that is one of the most active projects in the crypto space.
Thank you. Actually, this links with my next question. That is this is an open question to everyone. How do you see this new internet? Des gave a bit of a glimpse of what is this new internet, But if the rest of you could give us a view of, from your vantage point of view, how do you think that this new internet would look like for users and for companies? Because I think that it's important for both sides. Oh,
do you want me to jump in or?
It's an open question to everyone. So Henri unmuted. So
yeah, for me, I mean, for the first time ever, we can actually own value, we can own data, we can own assets, and we can transfer those without anyone's permission. Right? This is huge. Like money in a bank account, maybe you thought it's yours, but it's more like a promise of money instead of money itself, right? So for me, it's about ownership and the sort of democratization of power in the internet, and it unlocks a new class of all kind of use cases, where like most applications today are running in cloud data centers of the big 5 tech companies. But with this change, the power will be distributed, and applications will be built on top of decentralized backends like blockchains and IPFS and maybe Streamr. We've seen breakthroughs already with the sort of killer apps that we've seen in ICOs and DeFi and NFTs, and I think it's just very much the beginning, right? And in our niche of data, you know, we're seeing applications like data crowdsourcing and peer-to-peer data monetization and this kind of things that haven't really been possible with the existing technologies. So that's what inspires me in this space.
Eric.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah, I think I accidentally unmuted myself. My bad. But I mean, I'll try to chime in a little bit. Hopefully, the new internet essentially looks to the end user quite similar to what they're currently used to in the current internet, except for the fact that they can just assume to some extent that a lot of the things that they see that happens is actually what happens, and that there's kind of no third party really involved in kind of spying on them or taking their data or anything like that. So it's really, the new internet is hopefully looks pretty similar to the current one, except just what the internet was originally intended for. And I think when the internet was first built, really they kind of weren't expecting these large tech companies to really monopolize in a certain way and then use people's data in this way. And then for companies and developers in a sense, I think the internet, the new internet will look a little bit different, that the tech stack that they build on will be quite different. But it's pretty interesting because it might actually simplify the way that companies actually think about deployment, because now instead of kind of thinking about making sure all these servers, for example, are up, you just kind of deploy code to some sort of cloud-like thing, and that once you deploy your code to this decentralized cloud of some type, your code will be up, and then it will basically be sent and available to these users. I mean, the only thing that you need to be aware of is basically how to incentivize these users now in a financial way. So I think the considerations are slightly different, but to some extent, I think it might actually make participating in the internet actually easier for certain groups of people.
Aidan.
Hey, so I think it's really important to decouple 2 concepts here, right? Which is the web, which is what we're really talking about, and the internet, which is what is the piping for the web, right? So most of us here are not actually doing anything with the internet. The internet are the things that, pipes going through the oceans, this is the internet, right? What we work on is the web. We're working on this layer on top of the internet that helps us truly have access to privacy, tooling, accountability, transparency, all these great buzzwords that, a lot of us love, because they're a lot more than buzzwords. They mean, so much to individuals' lives. But at the end of the day, we're not really doing anything about the internet. So, I mean, I know when we got into the space many years ago, there mesh nets and these things, these were incredible ideas that we haven't really seen proliferate too much. But that would be kind of solving for the internet. I think it's important for us to remember our place and remember what we're here to do. And that's to focus on the web, to focus on the thing that individuals can participate in, can be a part of, really the economies that exist on top of the internet. So eventually we'll be decentralizing the internet. And there are many grandiose projects in the blockchain space who are looking at decentralizing the internet. But it's really important to remember, I guess, our place, and so that we can highlight the place that others need to step up and provide a lot of value to end people and end users. So what is Web3? What is this new web? This new web is one where you can get your data. And this doesn't mean necessarily data as in, the metadata that's tracked from you on a website. It could mean that, but it could also mean, your balance of how much money you have, your portfolio of how many collectibles you have, your reputation of a game, right? There's so many different aspects of Web3 that truly give you the freedoms you need to be able to own your own digital experience. And so I think it's really important for us to remember that what we're doing here is defining what can be the future of your experience with your relationships, your economic relationships with all of the participants in this beautiful experiment, this beautiful thing called the web. And that's something that we absolutely have the power today to revolutionize, and are doing so, each of the people here in different ways.
Really exciting. Peng, does any of you have anything to add? If not, we can move to the next question. I have a bunch of them.
Just a quick thought to add. I always think kind of the canary in the coal mine for the early web was when artists and musicians and creators, they couldn't really make any money. There was no native payment layer. There was no way for them to get that exchange. And I think we're seeing that coming back. So I think a lot of the things that we're kind of missing are now, things that were in the physical world are now being replicated. The things, the ownership, the ability to transfer, all of that stuff is coming. I think it's going to create a really vibrant ecosystem. I think there will be lots of transfers of value and data and things where all the players benefit rather than a few, I would hope.
I think to sum up, what everyone has been saying on this topic, the new web is self-sovereign, decentralized, right? In Web 2.0, we use applications run by major corporations, and we pay with our privacy and our personal data. Web3 is changing all that. We're building on decentralized infrastructure, and the apps that we use are community-owned. The wallets and front ends are open source, and our personal data travels with us between apps, so you're not ever locked in. And in Web3, companies will continue to be replaced over time by decentralized organizations that allow contributors and users to have more skin in the game, and also more control over the future of these applications.
Thank you all. This is really exciting. And actually, let's do a round of questions from the audience, because everyone is really interested in it. And I'm going to go with the first one. That is one that I'm personally really interested in, and it goes to Aidan, because they say that it's a good point what you say. These are all great initiatives, but as you have pointed out, they reside pretty much on the web at layers 5, 6, and 7. What are your views on decentralizing the internet by revamping from layer 1? Because just making changes at layer 1 will not stop big tech companies from grabbing data at the ISP. Mesh networks.
Yeah, so things like mesh networks have been around. Things like peer-to-peer networks are what blockchains are built on top of. But I think a really important distinction here, though, is that when we are building the web in a way that is private by default, right? Private by design, we aren't allowing for certain things to be collected because of the pseudo-anonymous nature, and now the completely private nature of some of these new projects that are coming out. So I think it's really important to remember that we are building things in a way where there is so much damage they can do. And at the end of the day, there are initiatives that are working towards building more local internets, right? These mesh networks where people kind of work together to provide basically what should be a free service. Because at the end of the day, this is a right of humanity. Without the internet, you cannot empower your community. You can't take your family to that next part of the future. And so this is a right for individuals that we're really just starting to understand how we can democratize this right and not just make it so that when we are offering this and giving this and agreeing for this to be a right of others, that ISPs aren't the ones who are making money from taxpayer dollars. So it's really important. And in Canada, we have a huge issue with our ISPs in terms of who controls our internet. But it's important to remember that there's only so much damage that they can do. And, we're seeing such incredible innovation in the ways in which an internet can be created for people. But there also are a lot of primitives that are truly crucial to this whole thing. I don't know if people have noticed Alfonso's shirt, but he's wearing a DRAND shirt. And so DRAND is a distributed project that generates randomness as a core primitive for the web. And so when doing a lot of things on the web, you require randomness. And so DRAND is a group that, an open source project where there's about 20 something members that help to run a node that helps every 30 seconds provide entropy for people to grab. So if you go to drand.love, you can see that every 30 seconds, there's a new value generated that you can use for whatever application you want. And so these are core primitives that maybe people don't think about that are crucial for the new web to exist.
And go to DRAND Love. You will love the project. And now, let's move to another question that actually is related. And I'm going to generalize this question to everyone because someone asked if Brave can take down the almighty giant Google. You probably have faced this question over and over again. And I'm going to generalize that to, do you think that these big techs will join our trend of Web3 or they will try to compete against it? So that's the audience question and my follow-up question.
Yeah, I might jump in and take that one.
Please.
I think it's a big question. So I believe yes, but let me try and break it down. The big tech companies, most of them are big ad tech companies, and they have built up a really sophisticated, hugely detailed system that relies on selling ultimately data of people and profiles of people to advertisers. They're kind of stuck in that world. It's very difficult to change because they've got fiduciary duties to their shareholders. They've got a whole machinery that works around ultimately that ad tech world, that the product that they're selling. So I do believe when and the shift is already happening, but it's when it accelerates and people say, I actually don't want to be part of that world. And the thing at the moment is there is more people that don't want to be part of it, but they can't find the alternatives. So I think as the alternatives are there, people will start to stampede away, and it's going to be very hard for Google to change their kind of core business model. I'm not saying they can't do it, and I'm sure they will experiment, and I'm sure they will. There's a lot of bright people in there. They will certainly come up with stuff, but it's going to be difficult. Like it's not even an oil tanker. It's like, it's like that thing that got stuck in the Suez Canal. It's like something 10 times the size of that. And it's going to be very hard to turn it around in a comparable canal of some sort. So I think it's difficult. And I think that gives all the new innovators in the space a lot of opportunity to grow before Google are in a position to do anything new.
What are the take of the rest?
I mean,
we would be able to compete against them or not?
It's funny, like with the internet and the web going mainstream, like during and after the IT bubble, every company suddenly had to become an internet company if they wanted to survive. And personally, I think that the same will happen for Web3 and blockchain and decentralization. Like every company will need to become a Web3 company if they want to survive. And this might happen in sort of subtle ways and under the hood and hiding the complexity of that. but it will happen. And I fully agree with Des that this change for existing companies will be very difficult. So some of them will manage to transform into this new era of operating, but many of them will simply fail. And that opens, of course, the door for these new teams that are born on crypto island, so to say, to take over. And if you're a sizable enterprise and you don't have a blockchain strategy and a blockchain team in your R&D department by now, then you're already behind, right? So get moving or get lost, I guess.
Anyone else wants to add something? If not, I will move to the next question. Another topic.
I guess just on one point, I guess like just, allowing for interoperability of data is one thing, but I guess I don't necessarily see too much difference in the selling of ads one way or another. At the end of the day, you're still selling people's attention. And that's definitely not something that I believe is going to be part of a future model, or at least that people are going to be comfortable with. I mean, I know a lot of people who use things like Brave, but don't actually engage in any of the ad side of things. And so I definitely think that that's going to be more and more of the model where people actually do want to pay for things. They don't want to take free things for a worse user experience and for selling themselves. And I think we've seen that with Spotify, right? Where people are actually comfortable paying a premium for something that they used to get for free just because of a user experience. And I think that's really important to remember, that people don't want a worse experience, or they don't really even want fractions of a penny. They want to have a better experience, which means interoperability of data. It doesn't mean a different business model on top of something that's already broken.
I might jump in there, just as you mentioned Brave. I think it's worth clarifying that the Brave model, we have a kind of phrase we use internally, that Silicon Valley has sent rockets into space but has not developed private ads. And one of the things that's distinctly different with the Brave ad system is that the ad server comes to your device. It comes to your phone and gets matched locally. So you get the privacy, but it's opt-in. So if people opt in, they can receive ads and they'll get paid for their attention. We fully expect, certain people and will not opt in. That's just not what they want. And we do have a whole series of paid products coming, to your point, Aidan. And I think that's a very real thing. People will make a conscious choice. I want to pay, and I want a different ad-free or in some way superior experience. But it's also worth pointing out that content and publishing has been funded by ads long before the internet, for well over 150 years. So that model is going to be very hard to break. That's a Lindy, to use that phrase, which is getting massively overused these days. But that trend of advertising, or respectful advertising, to match with content creation, it's going to be hard for us to break away from that, in my opinion.
It's sort of disappointing that ads have so far been such a big cornerstone in terms of business models on the web and on the internet. Like how can it be that no one has really come up with anything better than that? I'll tell you a story. This is sort of descriptive, even though it's not strictly related to the web, but we were sort of doing some stuff with car companies, and they now have these connected cars, and they want to find business models for that and new revenue streams. And they were like, hey, now that we have these connected cars, could we show ads to the drivers to create a new business model? And I was like, guys, you have these connected devices packed full of sensors that are roaming the environment, that could measure everything from air quality to potholes to whatever, pollution, temperature, humidity, everything. You can measure all of this with your intelligent sensors that are roaming the environment, crisscrossing everywhere and covering the whole planet. And you want to show ads to your customers. And
I might just jump in on that. I get where you're coming from, Henry, but there is $330 billion looking for a home in advertising every year. And that's why it's still there, because that money is floating around and it's being channeled into a particular place, because it's like just this big cloud of money that's like, okay, put it here. And to some degree, that inertia creates a continuation. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that's probably why you find yourself getting frustrated with people trying to put ads on everything.
And I don't have anything against the idea of ads, and definitely nothing against Brave, for example. I use it every day. But it's just that it would be good to have also different business models. And once we get like the infrastructure that can support these new kind of business models, I think they can be very well applied to the internet and sort of take us or the web, and take us from the sort of singleton universe of having just ads to actually having like, not only paid services, because payments become easier and more straightforward, but also other kind of business models that can exist with enough innovation and enough technology put in.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree. I think that's one of the most exciting things.
I think the analogy that you use, though, Des, is not necessarily, that's kind of like a defeatist attitude almost, in that, just because something is the way it is, we should kind of play into it. And I don't think that that's necessarily at all what this technology is about. I mean, we're looking at the crypto industry now being greater than $2 trillion. And I think a lot of people at the beginning said, well, gold is $10 trillion. Why would anyone want a digital gold? And I think a digital gold is not actually a digital gold. Like, you remember all those projects in the early days that were literally digitizing gold. How many of those have been able to keep up with Bitcoin? What these are completely new paradigms, completely new primitives that, as Henry's saying, there are better and newer business models that can exist. And yeah, I mean, I'm not against Brave, but I definitely don't see that. I see the beginning of what you said as ad tech. I don't see how Brave is not an ad tech company, basically doing the same thing, but just giving some of the revenues to users. I mean, it's what, 70% goes to users. It'd be much better to understand how Brave the company is related to Brave the Foundation. Like, these are things that people don't really know about, and there's not that much information about on the internet. So yeah, these are things that are incredibly important to understand, like the delineation between these, or the relationship between these two things, right? When we're talking about freedom and new and all these great stuff, I mean, transparency is number one.
Sure. You mentioned the connection between Brave and the foundation. You mean Basic Attention Token and Brave?
And a company that's raised money in the past. So how does that all work? So do you work for the foundation?
No, I work for Brave. Brave is a for-profit company.
And that's what I'm trying to understand, right? Like, what are the relationships between these things, and how do you make money as a company on the backs of users and claim?
I think you cut out there, or went on mute.
Lost you.
I don't think it necessarily needs to be black and white, right? What Web3 does offer is the ability for users to choose how they pay for, media, applications, anything that they want. And that's what's very different from Web 2.0, the choice that's there and the sovereignty over your own assets.
Yeah. Okay, I suggest that we move on to the next question, because we have a lot of them and we need to cover all of them. This question is for Peng, actually, because the audience wants some clarification on the rationale behind the inter-blockchain communication that Cosmos recently announced. And actually, I would like also to give his thoughts, Eric, to give his thoughts, because they also do this inter-blockchain communication. What is the rationale behind all of these protocols and having these blockchains talk to each other?
Yeah, so very recently, a couple of weeks ago, we managed to launch the Ibc Protocol on the very first chain, the Cosmos Hub. But there have been 3 to 4 chains since then that have also launched Ibc. So what does Ibc do at a high level? Well, it allows chains to send tokens from one to the other permissionlessly, entirely by the user. And so why is this useful? Why is this necessary? Like everyone has been talking about here, right? One of the values of Web3 is the ability for users to take what they own and move it to a different platform if they want, without any sort of vendor lock-in, right? So right now you're not able to, let's say, take all your posts on Reddit and move it to a different platform, or take your votes and move it somewhere else. But you're able to do things like that in Web3. And the reason why IBC is needed for Cosmos is, we believe the ideal scenario for both users and developers of blockchain apps for each app to run its own sovereign chain, right? For users, that allows them to just pay fees required by the app itself. For developers, it lets them choose, their ideal governance group, their ideal community they want to govern their own app, rather than be subject to a broader ecosystem governance process. And this, this future ideal of multiple chains, thousands, hundreds, millions of chains, require an inter-blockchain communication protocol called IBC. And that's why we've been working so hard on making this happen. And the use cases, one of the primary use cases, the most obvious use case, right, is the ability to create inter-chain exchanges, letting users take their assets, whether they are NFTs or fungible tokens, to exchanges that exist through IBC and trade them for any other asset that they want. So that allows developers to build on a platform they entirely own with their community, but also be able to interoperate and send tokens across to other chains as users decide to move on. Let's say they're playing a game and they have so many assets on one chain, but they want to play a different game, right? They might be able to sell all their assets on this interchain exchange and switch over to a new game.
Awesome. So thank you, Peng, for talking about how in the Cosmos ecosystem, how inter-blockchain communication works. I think in the Polkadot ecosystem, we also have a very similar kind of rationale behind why we care about communicating, cross-chain communication in a sense. So what we believe is that there are going to be application-specific blockchains in the future, and this is because each of these blockchains will have its own set of developers, own set of communities, governed by the rules that community wants to be governed by. But then within these applications, there are going to be people who want to communicate between different use cases or create use cases that are kind of more powerful if they're able to communicate compared to if they're just alone and by themselves. And in the Polkadot ecosystem, we have what's called XCMP, which essentially allows in the Polkadot ecosystem, what we call parachains, to essentially communicate each other without at the beginning involving what we call the Polkadot relay chain. And I think this is really kind of the core of, I guess, what Web3 really should enable, is for these, I guess, developers to really have as much power, and these end users to have as much power as they want, to ensure that whatever kind of message they want to get across can get across not only to their own community, but to kind of any community within this kind of broader blockchain ecosystem. And within Polkadot, it will hopefully not just get across the Polkadot ecosystem, but hopefully through bridges that are built between, I guess, the Polkadot network and networks such as Cosmos. Also, these messages can also get to the Cosmos ecosystem as well.
Thank you. And I'm gonna start a discussion. I'm afraid to throw this question, but it's a good one. So many people, at least it seems that many people are concerned about the viability of these foundations and these projects, because they're spending a lot of money marketing in promoting their protocol. But how will these foundations and these projects be funded in the future, and what incentive do the employees of these foundations have to achieve continued success into perpetuity? I have my own opinion, but I'm not going to jump here. So who wants to start?
I guess I could begin. So Parity is a for-profit company, but within the Polkadot ecosystem, Polkadot is stewarded by what we call the Web3 Foundation. And one of the ideas for the foundation's existence is to kind of, in the early stages of this protocol, provide a sort of guidance, maybe, and contribute, for example, financially as well to, I guess, the growth of the ecosystem, make sure that the network is growing at a certain rate. But then I actually don't think that a lot of these foundations actually intend to kind of remain for a super long amount of time, because ultimately in a truly decentralized ecosystem, you don't actually need a foundation behind that protocol. You don't need any centralized entity behind the development of a protocol. So if the foundation is doing its job well, it will kind of progressively decentralize and make the protocol popular enough and the network popular enough so that in the future, it doesn't even need to exist anymore.
Exactly. And one thing that's very important to realize is that building something takes a lot more money than maintaining something. So many projects raise funding in the beginning to build the thing and then build some kind of token economy or some kind of fee or tax or whatever it's called to go into some kind of long-term maintenance fund. And like you said, it doesn't need to be the origin team, the founding team that gets this money. Rather, it can be governed via a DAO and placed as bounties or whatever. And if there's enough stakeholders in the ecosystem to care about it at all, then that work will get done for sure, because there's very heavy incentives to do so.
Aidan.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really like this question, and I think it's a really important one. And something we ask ourselves is how many outside entities are contributing to the core fundamental technology, the core fundamental infrastructure? How many, Peng talked about vendor lock-in. I mean, that's very true for a lot of decentralized protocols, a lot of blockchain protocols where there isn't an actual effort from day one to ensure that multiple entities are stewards of the tech and are actually main stakeholders of the future growth of these networks. And I definitely think that, that for us is a real core fundamental need before we engage with different groups. They claim to be decentralized, but are they just decentralizing the fundraising of their protocols to then centralize the development of their ecosystem? Because that's what we see a lot of, but that isn't usually the case. Usually these foundations are incredibly, or not, I shouldn't say usually, but in a lot of the cases, these foundations have a vision for, removing their position in the space, as Eric was mentioning, and getting to a point where they are potentially just creating relationships between people and allowing for the stewards of the technology, the builders, to take that and move it forward beyond anything they could imagine. Because for us, that's key. It's so important to truly see people's actual intention through who is doing the development work. And a lot of the cases, it can be faster to do it all yourself, but that won't build resiliency, that won't build a true ecosystem, and that won't create decentralization of the protocol. And so that's a core component of what we look at when we consider whether or not this chain or their vision for a chain is sufficiently decentralized or not.
Peng.
So similar, to Polkadot. Thanks, Eric. We are a for-profit company, right? Tendermint's a for-profit company, but at the same time, every tool we build is open source. One of the greatest things that we're building is Starport, which is sort of the easiest way to build a sovereign chain in the world. And over time, right, the foundation, the Interchain Foundation that does fund the majority of Cosmos development will fade, and their influence will fade. And in fact, some of that's happening right now on the Cosmos blockchain. Roughly about 2.5 months ago, the community, the Atom Holder community, decided to fund roughly $2.5 million into marketing, and it went to a multi-sig held by the community. And it was, this whole distribution of funds was also run by the community. Similarly, I think a couple of weeks ago, there are plans to have the community fund further development into an EVM solution for Cosmos, to sort of accelerate production of that and get that going. And that's also entirely community funded. So over time, I would expect, token holders themselves across various platforms to use various forms of on-chain governance to fund development of future infrastructure. The foundations, for most companies, for most chains, right, are really there to siege the initial growth and get initial interest, but they're not meant to be here for the long time.
Thank you. I don't know if someone else wants to add something.
Well, I have maybe a question more than a comment. Like, how do you guys see, like, at which stage should this sort of full decentralization of the governance and the thing sort of kick in? Like, most teams start by definition maybe like more or less centralized, and then they have this vision of full decentralization. But the way to get there and the optimal pace to get there is not exactly trivial. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
I might jump in with some quick thoughts on that. So we have a program on our side moving through kind of Gemini and Apollo. These are different terms we've used as to the steps we'll go through to decentralize our ecosystem. But I think everybody wants to start out with a lot of decentralization, but it takes time, and there are multiple steps. To go back to the original question, Brave is a for-profit company. But in order for us to deliver on all these steps, there needs to be a business model that enables us to fund all of that. And that business model will change over time as things decentralize. And as we move away from that ad, the weight of that ad environment that I mentioned earlier, all those things will change. All those new business models will open up. But I think we have to be realistic that there are steps. I don't think it's that easy to turn things around overnight. So I think it'll be a bit slower than maybe people expect. But I think when it does, what it will open up will be immense. It'll probably be hard for us to fathom.
I mean, but I guess the question becomes, are you the only one able to build a business model or to dictate what the business model is for the technology? And that is the question of sufficient decentralization. Who is able to build business models? And obviously there are people who are getting rewarded for things, but who is going to be able to capitalize on most of that pie at the end of the day? And if a protocol is not building itself in a way that is truly anti-fragile and decentralized in terms of sharing the value created by these platforms with other contributors, however these foundations choose to claim decentralization, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because there will just be a centralized entity that controls most of the actual value creation that comes through that. And so to answer your question, Henry, I would say that it's a case-by-case situation. It really depends. And it really depends on intention, right? Like, why are these foundations being created? A lot of the cases, foundations are really created just to create separation between for-profit companies and non-profit companies. We don't believe that is, how it needs to be. And we've seen a lot of people do this really effectively, where they really do care about creating incentives for the community to take ownership of the protocol. And it's an incredible thing to see. And it's really obvious when it's not the case. I think your question, it's kind of like I don't have an answer, but the answer is it really depends on the intention, right? Why are people doing that, and what is the purpose of them doing that?
Yeah, thanks. I didn't want to hijack the flow of questions, so I'll just shut up now.
Actually, there's a follow-up question for Eric around this topic. I would say the foundations are not needed to keep the project going if it is truly decentralized. But having foundations tends to be a better approach when it comes to evolution and growth of the project. While being a DAO is ideal, history has taught us that the communities are more like whales. You still need an alpha penguin to lead the way. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way I like to think of it is that I think while there are still kind of active organization of communities around all of these things, like in the sense that we think about, the Polkadot community being, I guess, these people kind of actively involved in championing the cause. I think that in a sense demonstrates that it's still relatively early on in the development of this project. Because I mean, just like we see the internet today, we essentially take the internet community as not even a disparate community, but we think of the internet community as more of its sub-communities that is in it. For example, the YouTube community, or all these communities of applications that are being built on top of it. So hopefully, even if Polkadot, let's say, becomes no longer stewarded by any particular groups of people, if it is successful enough, then really the communities will kind of evolve away from just being thought of as, I guess, the Polkadot community into communities of let's say parachains or applications that are being built on top of this network instead.
Thank you. I think that we can move on. I mean, enough with foundations and that, unless you want to keep discussing about them. But like, here's a really interesting question that says, I mean, how do you see the transition from Web 2 to Web 3? And what will it take to make it happen? And also I want to do a follow-up, which is for blockchain, I mean, for people that don't understand blockchain, Web 3 and so on, how can we explain them that Web 3 is a better option? You have like shared a few, like privacy and a few more benefits of blockchain and Web 3, but how can we sell this Web 3 revolution, and how can we make this transition happen? Should I pick someone like in class? Okay, that's your turn. Okay, Peng, thanks.
Sure. So the question was, how do we get this transition from Web 2 to Web 3 faster? Is that right?
So, I mean, the question is, how would this transition look like, and how can we get adoption?
Sure. So the transition is already starting, right? So it's primarily early adopters right now, but there are more and more people, picking up crypto. Perhaps it's just Bitcoin. Maybe for some it's ETH, but for a lot of people, they're starting to open their eyes to crypto, and it's at the stage where we're, about to cross the chasm to mainstream. But at the same time, the thing that will allow more people to join, sort of lower the barriers to entry, are two things, right? First of all, it's the sort of great work being done at the infrastructure level and at the user experience level to make usability as good as Web 2.0, right? Obviously, one of the big advantages of Web 2.0 is that because services are centralized and ownership centralized, everything sort of, everything in one web application reports to one company, they're able to build very good, very strong user experiences, on the website front, on the mobile application front, and Web3 has a lot of ways to go to get there, right? So I think, an improvement in usability for both, end users who have to hold tokens and who have no idea what private keys or mnemonics are. And then on the developer front, right, making various protocols as easy to use as it is to, to use WordPress, or maybe for someone slightly more technically inclined, to use like a JavaScript framework. I think a lot of work has gone into usability for the web, and not all of that's there yet for Web3.
I'll jump in with a quick thought. I don't think Web3 has had its Netscape moment yet. I don't think it's had this big breakthrough where it's gone mainstream. I think it's coming. I think there's loads of really exciting things bubbling away. And I think what Peng said about usability is so important. It's that 10x in experience, which often comes down to usability, is the bit that people go, okay, I get it. I think some of the DeFi stuff that's happening, I think Compound was an early, leader in the space, and I think it'll continue to iterate the whole space. But I think, that there is a school of thought that Web 2 and Web 1 led to kind of an explosion of web developers. I think we could get an explosion of investment advisors and artists with, NFTs and with DeFi, and those people become the evangelists, and they have they bring something forward. I think we're on the cusp of that, and hopefully it happens really soon. It'll be incredibly exciting.
And we are only pointing out the benefits. Do any of you have any kind of concerns with this new trend of Web 3.0?
I'm concerned. Oh yeah, sorry, Henry. You can
Go ahead, Aidan.
Are you sure? Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm really concerned that people don't actually understand what they're being given. I'm concerned that people are taking advantage of asymmetrical kind of knowledge gaps, that they're being told something is decentralized, they're being told something is safe, secure, and it's none of those things. And it never ever intends to be those things. So I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned with an average person. I'm concerned with the thought of my mom being her own bank. I don't think that that's something I think she ever wants to be or should need to think she needs to be. And so I definitely think that we need a lot more kind of on the user experience, but maybe from a key management perspective, from a onboarding perspective. And I think we need real applications. We need real utility to be built. I mean, when I joined the space, the thing that excited me the most was DAOs. And it wasn't investment vehicle DAOs. It was DAOs that could operate new commons, new services, new ways in which we can all kind of communicate and exchange with one another. And these things are close, but not close enough. And I think that that's really where we need to be to truly provide utility for the world. Because money's cool and all, but if I can't do anything with my money other than make more money, it's not something for the masses, and it never will be something for the masses. So my hope is that in the next few years, we start thinking and building for regular people, and regular people need regular things. And we're definitely nowhere near that. And, I asked the people who think that everyone should own an NFT, how much art do those people have in their portfolio? I think these are real questions we need to ask ourselves. What are we doing with these NFTs? A regular person, I'm a pretty young guy. My friends don't own art that I went to high school and university with. What are they going to do with art? And so we need to start creating real utility. And NFTs have an incredible amount of value outside of just selling art to rich people. And I think that that's when we're going to really unlock this next generation of applications. And we really empower people to be able to build from a developer experience things that we all use day to day in our lives, because it is possible. We just need people to believe that there's value in them creating it.
That's a great point. Henri?
I was actually about to bring up the same sort of responsibility and usability angle. Like since we sell Web3 with the sort of opportunity to own your own money and own your own assets and blah, blah, blah. But I agree that most people are not ready to take responsibility for that. And it can go horribly wrong. And it's gone horribly wrong a number of times already. And there's probably no easy solution to that. And that's partially to blame, of course, with the current status quo, that people are so used to the situation where someone else is taking care of my stuff, right? Somebody else actually manages my money, it's in the bank, and somebody else is, doing this and doing that. And now it needs to be me. That's really scary. That's terrible. And I think the usability challenge and the responsibility challenge are the biggest blockers of Web3 adoption at this time.
I agree. So
I would add just a quick thought. If you look at history, every time a breakthrough technology, like a big breakthrough technology comes along, railroads, telecoms, electricity, the web, people lose a lot of money. And I'm not endorsing that. I don't think it's a good thing, but that is a real downside. The first iteration, there's different forms of mania and enthusiasm. People get sucked into scams. That happens. And I think because this is such a big, a globally connected thing, I fear that there will be a lot of fallout from that. We've seen some of it already, but I think that's just something, I think, it comes with the territory, but as a community, we have to try and protect people from that where possible.
Yes, exactly. And ideally, it's like, one step backward and 2 steps forward. I'm just a little concerned that it's going to be like 1 step backward, 1 step forward, repeat forever kind of thing. But there's certainly potential.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I'm gonna throw a question because I've seen this buzzword in a few questions, smart cities. So I'm gonna just throw it where Streamr and other projects can be used in the smart cities. I see someone from the smart cities industry trying to find out if there's value here.
Sure. Okay, so smart cities is a very broad spectrum of things. You have everything from smart traffic, smart energy, smart buildings, smart everything. So maybe it's a little bit easier to answer if we narrow it down. But we could think about, for example, smart traffic, as it was also used in that little ad story that I told before. So how does Streamr come in? So the problem with current approaches when it comes to smart devices and connected devices is that the data is very easily siloed. So you have one, let's say the public transport authority is make some kind of open data API where you can stream the real-time location of buses and trams and whatnot. And then on the other hand, you have like connected cars on the streets, and you have smart traffic lights, and you have this and that, and everything is a separate system that doesn't by definition like talk to each other. You can plug them together by making an integration between the APIs, but you don't have this connective fabric that would act as a sort of common ground for all data that's being produced, enabling anyone basically to tap into those data streams and innovate and create new applications like some kind of predictions or whatever you're planning to create there. So that's what Streamr is sort of trying to solve there in smart cities, that it would act as this kind of shared fabric between different kind of devices where anyone can publish and subscribe data streams and use each other's data streams. Of course, it's not only for open data, but it can also be encrypted and permission controlled and this kind of thing. But just to enable that efficiency that can be achieved by unsiloing that data and putting it onto like a connective tissue in between.
Thank you. So we're running out of time. We have 4 minutes left. So let's do an experiment. You have like 1 minute, less than 1 minute each to leave a final message on this broad plan of building a new internet. So Des, take it away, because you're in the top of my screen.
Okay, I'm in the hot seat. Where to go with this? I think the revolution is in people's choices. I think there is now some really credible Web3 options, or options that are taking us in that direction. Start using them, start road testing them, start spending your time on those projects. If there's UI UX suggestions, ping the devs on Twitter or GitHub and make those suggestions. We change for the better by actually getting involved and voting with our time and our actions. What we do, where we put our energy, will build a better web.
Awesome, thanks. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now is a really good time for the whole Web3 development of Web3 as a whole. And there's kind of so many things that are really interesting for everyone to take a look at. Not everyone has to be involved in actually building this stuff, but I think that for anyone who's listening, I think that you're already interested enough in the concept of Web3 in the first place. So I think it's just great to just keep track of what's happening in the space, and then so that when you do feel like participating, I think you'll be able to do that very quickly and take advantage of the knowledge that you've already gained in the meanwhile.
So Peng or Henri, that you muted yourself.
So what people want will shape what the world will look like. So want better things. You need to want better things, and the centralized web is not enough. So it's great if people get involved, learn, be creative and be inspired. And to make a Matrix reference, take the red pill.
Peng.
Yeah, so for the builders out there, if you want to build your own chain, you should check out Cosmos. So in case you didn't know, Cosmos.
Ooh, no ads. No ads.
No
I'm
ads.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Right. We really want builders to get into this space, right? And Cosmos is one of the best ways to do so. In case you didn't know, it's what Binance Coin is built on. It's what the Cosmos Hub is built on. It's what Terra and Thorchain are built on. Check it out at cosmos.network. And if you want to participate, in your favorite Web3 platform, get involved in the community. We hire people from the community. We fund people in the community. And I think that's, the same for everyone here.
And last minutes for Aidan.
Yeah, just thank you all for being a part of the conversation and for wanting to, participate in whatever that future web looks like. I mean, it really is in all of our hands. And just remember that, it's really early days. I mean, in 2015, I thought I was too late. So just remember, all of you are able to be pivotal parts of the future. And it really just happens with a lot of people going into their networks and finding people that have commonalities with one another and building something that they know people need. The best thing you can ever do is build something you want. And so do that and be proud of it and be courageous enough to take a step into the new web. Don't accept what people tell you. Do your own homework, read into the structures of these organizations, read into the way in which people are doing what they do. It all looks great on paper, but all it takes is a little bit of research to truly understand how these structures are built. So do your own research. Don't believe, just the narrative, the general narrative, but at the same time, do have hope and faith that there is a positive intention to doing something a little bit better. Hopefully 2 steps forward, Henri. Hopefully not just 1 step forward, but we'll have to see, and it's up to all of us to make that happen.
So thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed.